Welcome back to the week 3 edition of Johnny's Scramble Drill. I'm Stucky, and joining me as he does each and every week is none other than Johnny Manziel. As we always do, we will talk the 3 biggest games on Saturday's slate, one at noon, one at 3:30, and one in prime time. And we'll kick things off here with Alabama, Wisconsin, which will kick off at noon on Saturday in Madison. Should be a raucous crowd. Alabama, a 16-point favorite. Wisconsin hasn't been a home dog this large since 2005 when they were 14.5 underdogs against Ohio State. They didn't win that game, but they did cover, losing only by 14. Wisconsin, over the past 30 years, 0-11 outright as double-digit home underdogs. Johnny, Alabama's offensive line had major issues last week against USF. They were missing a couple of guys. We'll see if they get healthy this week. But before we get into your thoughts in this game, just from your perspective as a quarterback, can you offer any insight into what it's like going into a game where you know that your offensive line might struggle, or that there might be some issues up front? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a weird time when you're shuffling some guys around, especially from the quarterback position, having, some different faces and things like that. But, it comes down to the unit and cohesiveness. I think there is a lot of things in a week that you can fix. And Alabama is usually a team that gets down to the bottom of those and fixes things really fast. So a lot of it comes down to just communication, getting time throughout the week to really get in the meeting rooms, make sure you're going over things. And time on the practice field is imperative, especially when, look at last week. I think Alabama was a lot of self-inflicted struggles, and that's something they'll have to clean up quick. And it's something that I think you can do, right? I think it's, from a communication standpoint throughout your entire team, entire offense. I think Jalen Milroe will have to sit down with those guys this week, obviously, and make sure they're all on the same page, because it really starts, up front each and every week.
Yeah, I think the offensive line had 8 penalties in the game. So we'll see if Alabama can get that cleaned up in what should be a raucous environment. But they are favorites of over 2 touchdowns here. Wisconsin offense, they're trying to go air raid, which doesn't make much sense to me in Wisconsin with that weather and how their identity. Wisconsin just like run the ball, Big Ten. I'm not sure if it's going to work. So there's definitely questions with their offense here. Who do you like in this game?
Yeah, I like Alabama by a lot. I think this is a chance for them to come back and really they've struggled a little bit throughout the season. And really, I think even last week, until the end of that game, they were looking a little iffy. So I think this is a week they get things cleaned up and they'll cover outright. Tyler Van Dyke in this passing attack, as you talked about a little bit, they're going up against an Alabama secondary who's very prepared and very, aggressive in the back end of that defense. I think this is a game where Alabama comes out, Jalen Milroe and the rest of this offense clean things up and come out and really just put it to Wisconsin. Obviously, tough going on the road in this environment, but I like Alabama in this one by the spread.
Yeah, there should be some opportunities for Milroe to hit some deep shots here. Wisconsin has a couple good defensive backs. I'm just not sure their defensive line, which is a weakness of their defense, can take advantage of some of the potential issues on Alabama's offensive line. Wisconsin's defensive line, they lost their best defensive tackle for the season earlier this year, which I think will hurt. But let's move on to the 3:30 game between your Aggies traveling to the Swamp to take on Florida. They're on a 3.5 to 4 point road favorite. A lot of uncertainty in this game because we didn't really learn much about either team last week, right? In week 1, Florida got blown out by Miami. And so the question could be, maybe Miami is that good, right? And maybe a lot of that blowout is credit to Miami. Maybe it's not as bad as things looked for Florida. And then Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame at home. Then we see Notre Dame lose to Northern Illinois, and then Texas A&M plays an FCS school. They look good, but it's hard to get a good sense. Quarterback uncertainty with Florida. I think Graham Mertz is going to start, but you have the highly touted DJ Lagway, who probably will get some run as well. Johnny, tough game to crack, but do you like your Aggies here?
Yeah, this is a game I'm definitely going to be locked into this week. I do like my Aggies on the money line here in this game. I think obviously anytime you go into the swamp, a very rowdy place to play. Really, a lot of questions around Florida. Are they that team from week one? Are they the team from week two with Lagway? Is Mertz going to start? Will Lagway get some play? We'll see. I think last week for Texas A&M, a positive thing is for them to get their offense going a little bit, even though it was against McNeese State. Wigman came back and played a lot better in that week. I think this is a game that they'll be excited for going into Florida to take on the Gators. And, I think they end up pulling this one out, but I think it'll be a close game.
I think your first ever game was at home against Florida, right?
It was.
Did you ever play in Gainesville?
We never played in Gainesville. We only played them the one time at home.
It's one of the more rowdy atmospheres. I think you told me previously one of the more underrated places you played was at Auburn, right?
Yeah, Auburn was a great environment. There's a lot of places throughout the SEC that are great, but anytime you turn on a TV, I remember A&M playing Florida a couple years ago, 3, 4 years ago, and it was an unbelievable game, but a very rowdy, atmosphere, great environment. So I expect this to be a really good game on Saturday.
Yeah, imperative for Texas A&M to not fall behind early, kind of take the crowd out of it. So that'll be something to watch. Let's move on to prime time. It's not the sexiest slate in week 3 that you'll ever see. So we're going to talk a little Georgia, Kentucky, right in my backyard. The Wildcats will host the Bulldogs as 24.5-point underdogs as we record this. The Kentucky offense, and again, more offensive line issues, couple guys hurt. They just couldn't block South Carolina, who does have a really good defensive line, but now you're going up against a Georgia defensive line. Could be problematic once again. Brock Vandagriff going up against his old team. I think he finished last week 3 of 10 for 30 yards and had negative 29 yards rushing when you include sacks. So he finished with 1 total yard of offense. It was ugly for Kentucky. This is a pretty big number. Kentucky still does have a pretty good defense. You'd expect their best effort here after getting embarrassed by South Carolina. But, I mean, Georgia is supremely talented. Can Kentucky stay within this number?
I don't think so. 183 yards and pretty much total offense last week, 5 sacks, 11, tackle for losses. I think this is going up against a Georgia team that, I give South Carolina some credit for getting after them last week, but this is just spelling disaster for Kentucky. They've lost 14 in a row to Georgia. This is not a team you want to be running into right now when you're having offensive woes. Obviously, Vandagriff going against his former team. I think this one is going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly early. I like Georgia to cover in this game and continue their streak of where they're headed this season.
Yeah, and Georgia knows Vandagriff as well. Maybe Kentucky's best bet is potential weather across college football this weekend. Hope for some weather, some fumbles, and some turnover luck. Because it's going to be a tall task.
Hope for some self-inflicted penalties and some things like that for Kentucky, but they're going to need all the help they can get going against the Georgia squad, who is primed and rolling right now.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tall task for Stoops' bunch, who will look to bounce back after a bad loss against South Carolina at home last week. All right, that'll wrap this up. To summarize, you like Alabama against the spread. You like Texas A&M to get it done outright, and Georgia to cover as well. Back to your roots, Johnny. Last week you went against an SEC team and it didn't work out. An SEC sweep across the board. I wish you luck, and I'll see you for week 4's Scramble Drill next week. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.